Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the next campaign diary for Rise of Tiamat. We are in Chapter 7, Xonathals Tower, and this is kind of Part 2 of Xonathals Tower, and oh boy, what a mess it has become. You know, even before I got into this chapter, I debated on whether or not I even wanted to do this chapter. It's clunky, it's esoteric, it's a little wacky. I can feel, I look at this and I can see where it's going to be a problem for a lot of DMs and a lot of players with its really, well, clunky and esoteric. These are the two words I can only come up with this chapter. But the clunky and esoteric puzzle elements, and if things don't work out, how do you get out of those situations? I'm going to bring one of those little scenarios up here tonight. I didn't have a lot of time to, actually, let me take that back. It took an incredible amount of time to prep this. I'll show a quick video here. Prep this in Tabletop Simulator. I don't know what was going on. It was so tedious to put together compared to any other map that I had done thus far with Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. It's just something about this chapter. I can't quite put my fingers on it, but stuff is just everywhere. It bounces all over the place. This map is just so strange to work with. I don't know what I feel about this particular chapter. I almost want to recommend that you just skip it, or you try to come up with your own scenarios, because it's just so weird, and I guarantee you some groups are just going to have problems with these puzzles. And this is not an insult to intelligence by any means, because a group can't do puzzles or whatnot. It's nothing like that. It's just sometimes puzzles just don't click, and their solutions just don't click. And I feel like this was kind of a problem. I did have to drop a few hints here and there, and I felt, klutzy myself just running it. But I did have to drop a few hints here to solve a couple problems that we could have stayed in the maze for 1 or 2 hours longer than we needed to had I not done so. But this was a crazy chapter. Matter of fact, it ended in a really precarious situation. But for a little few fun facts, I actually wrote down how many 21s, well, who rolls a 21? How many natural 20s we rolled that night? 15 natural 20s in a single session, 5-hour session, 15 natural 20s. And 5 natural 1s. So a little fun fact here. But this is the B team, right? This is not the A team that's gone through Horde of the Dragon Queen and 3/4 of Rise of Tiamat. This is the B team that's taken on the task of going after Iskander and rescuing him. Now, the last campaign, we just had stepped foot into the maze, and I immediately ran it incorrectly. I think I talked about this last campaign diary. So be careful as a DM. You really can screw this up very rapidly. I mean, within 20 minutes of running it, you could be, you could really screw this up if you're not careful. All right, so just be aware of that. But we picked up, I had to actually retroactive, well, how do you describe that? I had to take an encounter that we ended with in the last session because I ran the maze wrong, and put that on the back burner and say, no, that didn't happen. You guys actually chose the right path. And next time they chose the wrong path, I just kind of reinserted that encounter. It was a little clunky, but I just had to run with it. We already had the initiatives and everything ready to go. I wasn't going to surprise them again with the same scenario. And I didn't prep 9 different scenarios. I had like 3 or 4 that were kind of pulled from the book, and that was it. So I ran with it, and it was fine. It worked at the table. Sometimes you just got to do this stuff. But they fought against the Trolls. They went back to the hedge maze. They made another guess and went in the right direction, looped back around, back to the sundial. And of course, they did what a lot of players do. They tried to scratch the sundial, or leave a coin on the sundial, or put some kind of message down. Every time they looped back around, wasn't there, it was gone. So they kept doing this over and over again. And we actually, here's the encounters we had. We had the Trolls. Well, gosh, what did we have? Did the Cyclops, which turned out to be a little, that almost fell apart. It almost fell apart, a little weird. And then we had the Gorgon. And because it's 6 high-level characters, the Gorgon was kind of a piece of cake. I mean, it wasn't really all that much. The Trolls was a natural, like a normal combat. Nothing exciting really happened there. A couple characters were pulled underwater. But again, they're so high-powered that a few swings, they're out of it. They're out of the pool. They got the Garnet and moved on. The Gorgon, again, 6 versus 1. Even though that Gorgon was running all over that maze, it didn't run all over the maze. It barely got its second movement in before it was killed. Again, a little bit of an oversight on my part. I thought what was on the card, little monster card, and its hit points and its abilities would be advantageous. But again, sometimes it depends on where you fall in initiative order. If you're down here and 4 others are in front of you, yeah, most likely you're not going to survive it. Now, the Cyclops thing was kind of cool. It would have been an interesting kind of low-key kind of a scenario. But the problem was The solutions that were presented in the book are really, again, esoteric. It's like, okay, I guess I hope they think of this. I mean, it was really, really kind of odd. They did have a levitation spell. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Cyclops appear in this pasture. The Cyclops pick up a rock, throw it, and they look to the characters as if to say, look, you pick up that other rock, and you got to throw it farther than I will, and then we're good. We don't have to worry about this. Well, the Cyclops picked up the rock, threw it, right? The characters, they pointed to a boulder. The characters look at it, and they weren't too sure what to do with it because they knew they needed to trick it somehow, right? They're looking at this boulder. Who could pick up this boulder? But the problem was they spent some of their spells before they got to the Cyclops, one of them being levitate. It was like, I think they only could cast it once a day or something like that. I'm not sure what the conditions were, but it wasn't available to them anymore. So they're looking at this rock, and they really, because of the party makeup, there was nothing they really could do. There was no spells of levitating or anything like that. They couldn't
mess with it and change it or
try to push it or anything. There was just nothing that was quite working. One character, the half-orc on the B team, I think it's Maiev. I'm getting all the names wrong because I'm so used to the characters. Well, we calculated she could pick up about, I think 600 pounds. The rock was about 400 to 500 pounds. So we said, okay, you could pick that up, but throwing it is something completely different. So we just rolled a die. She managed to throw it like 60 feet. But nowhere near the 100+ feet the Cyclops threw theirs, right? So then I was like, well, what do I do now? Because they kept thinking, they kept going through all their spells and trying to come up with ideas, and nothing would have worked, really. I mean, they were good ideas, but nothing would have worked because it was a 500-pound rock that was thrown, and now I was like, okay, what do I do? I had to quick think. Wow. Think quickly. I have a way of speaking like Yoda. Think quickly on my feet after a few minutes because I was just like, oh my gosh, just really, I'm hearing what they're doing. There's clever stuff here, but it won't work. The spells are exhausted. What are they going to do? So what I did, in case you get in this scenario, because you got to think of a way out, right? What if the players just cannot throw the rock and they just can't do anything with it? What the hell do you do? Well, here's what I did. I had one of the Cyclops kind of, they were slightly impressed with the rock throw because this little tiny person managed to throw it 60 feet. So we did an intimidation check. They passed it. And really kind of, it wasn't like they were trying to intimidate them, but they were just impressing them, right? Just, this is very impressive. Well, what the Cyclops did next was I had him walk over to his rock, put his arms up, and slam down and crack the rock, all right? And then he kind of folded his arms, looked at them. I was like, okay, maybe they can get out of this. Maybe we can do that. Maybe, what if they break the rock? I don't care how they do it. They can break the rock. We'll end this scenario. Well, that almost became a little bit of an issue too, but what happened was one of our characters cast illusion on the rock to make it look like it shattered and broke when one of the other characters hit it, right? And that basically solved the whole issue, even though none of that's in the book, right? None of that's set up in the book. I just had to do it and come up with it on the fly. Otherwise, I was kind of like, I don't know how to get out of this situation. I mean, I'm sure I would have thought about it eventually, but at the time I was a little panicky. I mean, everything else was running fine, clunky, but fine. But this one scenario suddenly that was so innocent was becoming a wee bit of a headache. So they split the rock. The Cyclops were happy. They gave him a jewel, and they managed to loop back around into the sundial. Now, we did this several other times. Like I said, those were the scenarios we went through. They worked out okay because most were just battle encounters. But there was, here's the problem, right? If the players aren't, again, this is not an insult to intelligence. Some people take this the wrong way, but puzzles can be really hard to do in D&D because they're so esoteric and they're not really, play tested enough or whatnot. And sometimes these solutions just aren't really noticeable or obvious, right? So I kind of felt like I had to drop, as a DM, I had to drop a few hints about leaping into the sundial to really progress the story, to progress the puzzle. And how I did that was one of the characters went up to it, and I felt like you feel like you're being pulled into the sundial, like there's like a magnetic field. And so as soon as he touched it, I said, disappear, you're gone, right? And so everybody else went in and touched it, right? And then the last phase where they have to actually jump into the hedge maze itself, don't touch anything else, they have to jump into a hedge. I mean, that was just esoteric. It was just like, how are they going to think this? So I did the same thing where they felt that magnetic pull towards the hedge maze, and they jumped in, and of course that dumped them right in front of the tower, right? So that's how we got through the maze. And I'm telling you, as a DM, it may sound like, well, this is obvious. There's just going to be no problem. Let me tell you, there's going to be problems. It's just a wacky. I just don't really like this chapter. Even when I was setting up, I was in my DM groups going, do I really want to do this? This seems a little weird. It seems clunky. Some of the things here are esoteric. I'm not feeling this chapter. And if you're feeling that way, don't worry, it's a true feeling. It's just a weird chapter. But anyway, they get to the tower and they start trying to figure out the portals and whatnot. And then of all things, they end up splitting the party in the tower with, these vague esoteric, that's the word, right? That's the word of the night. Esoteric symbols trying to hopping all over the place to figure out what's going on. I think the first person to do it was Glees, who was the Yuan Ti. They teleported into one room. He turned around and touched another one and just teleported away. I was like, as a DM, like, whatever, you can do what you're going to do. But I think a lot of the players were like, what? What are you doing? So he touched a random symbol, and then it was so hilarious. He beamed into, I think, room 11 or something like that. And then right in front of him are 6 cult fanatics and a mage that all look at him as he comes teleporting into the room. And he tried to charm them. He got most of them. 2 didn't. 2 of the cult fanatics, it didn't work. And of course, they're familiar with magic and mages and what, so they know what's going on here. So he tried to cast that really, really quickly and then turn himself invisible, but the cultists picked up on it and they started kicking their fellows to bring them back up again because they fell asleep. Not charmed, they fell asleep. And so he got out of there really fast and teleported back to their room. I think that's how it went down. But there was just a couple moments there where people were teleporting all over the place and separating themselves. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be hilarious and also like wacky because they're going to be all over this tower and they still don't quite understand the symbols. Well, they eventually get themselves into the observatory, and this is where the crap just goes down, right? This is just where everything kind of falls apart in a good and fun way, but everything falls apart. They beam in there. There's cultists. They have an item that prevents them from being surprised, so I couldn't surprise them. So everybody kind of eventually saw each other, and Jorgen Powell and his cult fanatics went at it. And what happened there? Oh, what happened? So some cult fanatics, because they had alerted the facility before that, well, these other cultist guys started following them. And as the heroes rushed in to fight Jorgen Powell and the other cultists, well, as soon as they did that, 5 or 6 other cultist members zoomed in. What's the word I'm looking for? Beamed in, let's say, to the portal behind them. And then Jorgen Powell, we'll call him Jorgen, sounds like some Swedish thing. Jorgen looked at them and gave a command, some kind of code word, and 3 of them ran back to the portal and disappeared. And for like 3 or 4 rounds, they were gone. And what they were doing was alerting the entire tower and taking every single cultist from every other room and bringing them back to this one. And it was a brutal fight, encounter, whatever, in this little tiny space that's still not over. We ended the night. Now, people were, the half-orc was cutting people in half. She was doing tremendous amount of damage. There were spells going off left and right in this little tiny confined space. It was a visceral fight. And they did bring down Jorgen Powell, and I was trying to get everybody to a certain spot where I could cast Fireball. I was like so trying to get that spell off, but couldn't do it without killing half my own players, my own NPCs, and maybe only hitting 1 or 2 heroes. Wasn't worth the time. I tried Hold Person again and again and again and again. That spell sucks. I never can get it to work on anybody. I'm talking 2 years of trying to get this spell just to hold a person. It doesn't work. The spell just half the time doesn't go off. Anyway, it's just, Anyway, here's where we left off. They did all this massacring, right? And there's still cultists left. Well, right at the end of the round, in come, I think, 12 to 14 cultists beam into the room stacked up behind them and ready to tear them to pieces. So the whole tower is alert. And it's very easy to do. If your players start bouncing around and hitting icons and portals, it's natural. It's natural. It's what's going to happen. It's just all the enemy is going to be like, hey, well, someone's here. So that is where we left off. That's where I was on the tower. I think I have an image here for it. I think I've already put it up probably. Where it's just, matter of fact, that's not all the cultists. I think I kind of miscalculated, so I'm going to have to do some adjustments. But that was near the end of the night. It was almost midnight. We played for like 5 hours. It took about 3 hours to get to the maze, and about 2.5 as we got into the tower for all this crazy stuff just to unfold. So we're going to run into a part 3, possibly a part 4. I mean, there's still areas in there that need to be explored. They have not found Iskander yet, but yet they have a whole tower on alert. We're going to see how this goes. For the next session, I'm actually going to go ahead and build out the entire room on Tabletop Simulator because it's such an intense encounter. I don't want to be trying to zoom in on this little tiny map to move all these different characters around. I'm just going to build one single room in Tabletop Simulator. But anyway, guys, we pick up again, not this Friday, but the next, and we'll do part 3 of Xonathals Tower. And actually, when we play, I'm getting rid of this. I'm throwing everything out of here, and I'm going to roll out in the open because it's like 16 to 17 verse 6, and whatever happens is what happens next session. It could be the end of the B team. Who knows? All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you. I'll see you in the next one.